This is Finale 4, otherwise known as the Wheatley boss fight. Here, Chell and GLaDOS confront Wheatley in an epic showdown for control over Aperture Laboratories. It's the final level and climax of Portal 2, and it shows off that puzzle games can have some pretty awesome boss fights. That being said, Finale 4 is also one of the longest maps in the game. Let's take a look at what completing this boss fight actually entails. The player loads into the level and has to portal up and navigate a catwalk. GLaDOS will raise the elevator into Wheatley's lair, where after a villain monologue, Wheatley will start launching bombs at the player. By standing next to the conversion gel pipe, you can trick Wheatley into breaking it, spilling goo everywhere, and making the whole chamber portalable. From here on out, you'll need to use portals to redirect Wheatley's bombs back at him. When this is done, Wheatley will be stunned, and GLaDOS will put a corrupted core into the chamber. The player has to retrieve this core and put it onto Wheatley. Just like any video game boss fight without a visible health bar, you'll have to do this 3 times until the fight is over. Each time, Wheatley orients his bomb shields differently, and the corrupted core is placed in a different spot in the chamber. And of course, with a different memorable personality. Once Wheatley has been fully corrupted, the player must hit the stalemate resolution button in a small room off to the side of the main chamber. After portaling in, Wheatley blasts away the player with his bomb trap. Shortly after, Chell gathers herself and can shoot the moon. This marks the end of the level and the game, as no more inputs are required to progress the following cutscenes and reach the ending credits. Needless to say, this isn't your average Portal 2 chamber, but that still doesn't make it exempt from speedrunners squeezing as much time as possible from the level, especially when the boss fight is littered with dead time. A 10-second elevator into the chamber, a minute-long villain monologue, waiting 5 seconds every time Wheatley throws a bomb, waiting 5 more seconds every time Wheatley wakes up, waiting 40 seconds for Wheatley to open the stalemate room, and waiting 15 seconds to shoot the moon after being blown away. With all of this considered, Finale 4 can look more like a cutscene than a puzzle from a speedrunner's perspective, and there's nothing speedrunners hate more than cutscenes. Let's take a look at how speedrunners found one of Portal 2's biggest skips in Finale 4. At first glance, skipping Finale 4 seems very challenging. Most of the previous Finale maps are made trivial through the use of the excursion funnel crouch fly glitch. In case you don't know, this glitch allows you to maintain 0 gravity by crouching while at a full stop in a funnel. In a normal speedrun, the fly glitch is preserved all the way from the end of Chapter 8, but it's actually slower to defy gravity throughout the boss fight, as you have to change elevation a lot when fetching the cores and attaching them to Wheatley. So speedrunners elect to drop the 0 gravity state at the end of Finale 3. But even without some game-breaking glitches, there's still time to be saved in Finale 4. The main speedrun strat speedrunners use here is called bomb juggling. To stun Wheatley, we only need to hit him with 1 bomb, but he fires multiple bombs, usually firing 3 before getting hit. Using well-placed floor portals, we can catch these leftover bombs, and they'll be stuck in motion flinging between our portals. We can then use these bombs to instantly stun Wheatley the moment he wakes up. Of course, this is a little tricky, as you also have to use the portals to move around the chamber and retrieve the cores, but that's why they call it bomb juggling. This saves around 4 seconds per bomb juggled, so around 8 seconds in total. There are also small optimizations that allow speedrunners to collect the cores faster, like using a clip brush to jump onto the railing here to avoid a catwalk collapse, and using a fling to grab the 3rd core out of the air, completely skipping the orange gel the chamber provides. Additionally, at the end of the chamber, when rain pours down and cleans most of the conversion gel, you normally have to use the small portal spot covered by Wheatley, but speedrunners instead spam a portal shot as the gel disappears to have a portal persist on the cleared floor, allowing instant travel into the stalemate room, and it all ends with an awesome strat called early moonshot. You would imagine that you can only shoot the moon when the ceiling crumbles apart and the moon is actually visible, but it turns out it's actually much earlier, like 15 seconds earlier. In fact, before the player even gets blown away from the bomb trap. There's a 0.1 second window before you lose control where you can shoot the moon. If you place a portal at the right place and at the right time, you can shoot the moon early and finish the game about 17 seconds sooner. and in the process, you also completely mess up the ending cutscene, as Chell uses her third hand and the portal gun makes a reappearance over the dramatic ending. All of this makes for a pretty interesting speedrun, but the skips are only a fraction of what feels like a cutscene level. The true holy grail of Finale 4 strats would be skipping the level altogether, and a skip of this magnitude could actually be possible. It all lies in the stalemate resolution room. This room opens up for us once we finish the boss fight, but if you happen to get in there earlier, despite not actually making any progress in the boss fight, you can still trigger Wheelie's trap, which lets you shoot the moon after a brief delay. This means that if you can somehow end up in the stalemate room, you can skip the entire fight. But of course, this is easier said than done. This is a completely blocked off room with nothing but a portal surface in it. For inbound speedruns, there doesn't seem to be an easy way to get into a completely blocked off room. It's worth noting that you can get behind the slanted walls of the chamber through this corner, which is still inbounds as there's a larger bounding box surrounding the level, but the stalemate room is still inaccessible from here. And that's really the only thing we have to work with. There were some out-of-bounds quick saving and quick loading glitches you could use to get into here, but when it came to the main category of inbounds no-save load abuse, we were stuck to bomb juggling and corrupting Wheelie. In this time, Finale 4 skip sort of became a myth. It was one of the few sought-out skips in the game that could theoretically save minutes if it existed, but realistically, we had no leads on what the skip would even look like. But in the meantime, it was always a great joke in the community. Plus 1 minute at the end of a run? Just find Finale 4 skip. Easy PB. Someone announcing something vague? Must be Finale 4 skip. The purpose of life? Finding Finale 4 skip. Finale 4 skip basically became the punchline to any joke in the Portal 2 speedrunning community. And unless we had some magical glitch that could just let us phase through walls, Finale 4 skip would be just that. Enter the PPD. Short for Player Physics Deformation Glitch, this infamous bug allows the player to completely clip through walls. It was found as early as 2016, but wasn't well understood until the 2020s. This extremely complex glitch uses some very unintuitive physics interactions, so it's quite complicated to explain. Due to how the source engine works, the player technically has two hitboxes. One normal hitbox for collision with walls, floors, and such, and another hitbox specifically for physics objects. This secondary hitbox is also called the physics shadow, and it's only used when the player collides with physics objects. Otherwise, it just shadows our normal hitbox. However, our physics shadow is also a physics object, so it's subject to all of the source engine physics jank. Specifically, there is an odd physics interaction where if an object is penetrated, basically if multiple objects overlap, the game will try to physics solve them apart, and it will rotate the object in an attempt to separate them. By doing this with our physics shadow hitbox, we can rotate it. This rotation is not trivial to achieve, but it can be done fairly easily through physics objects and map decals. Once sufficiently rotated, our secondary hitbox can slightly peek into walls, which we can use to our advantage. We can collide with a physics object to activate our secondary hitbox, which is currently stuck inside of a wall, so it tries to physics solve to the nearest available space. Hopefully, if it's thin enough, the other side of the surface. If done properly, both hitboxes appear on the other side of the wall, and the player has effectively teleported through it. This sounds like the perfect glitch for the Finale 4 skip, as theoretically, we could use PPD to clip into the stalemate room. However, there are some complications. First is starting the physics rotation. Once the two hitboxes are out of sync, a ton of normal decals can continue hitbox rotation, but getting the initial amount, even 0.1 degrees, is very challenging, and it usually takes a physics object. In Finale 4, we don't have access to any objects until the first corrupted core, which is nearly 2 minutes into the level, but using this hardly seems viable, because you have to rotate your physics shadow a ton to clip through this thick wall. To be precise, you have to rotate it a minimum of 67 degrees in order to have a chance at clipping through. With our understanding of PPD, getting this much rotation would likely take so long that even if it is possible, it would take much longer than 3.5 minutes, which is how long it takes to just normally speedrun the level, so we wouldn't even save time. This is why PPD is normally exclusively used in least portals challenge runs, and not speedruns, despite the game-breaking nature of the glitch. However, that wouldn't stop routers from trying to investigate PPD usage. In 2022, router and tasser Jaehoon decided to look closer at making Finale 4 skip a possibility with PPD. There were a ton of cool PPD spots in the chamber that could provide rotation once the hitboxes were out of sync, but the missing piece of the puzzle was getting that initial rotation. It wasn't until much more glitch hunting that Kurzihao discovered that missing piece, which was using the biggest physics object in the chamber, the boss itself. By jumping into Wheatley at the right spot with the fly glitch, we can initiate rotation. Just a small 0.12 degrees, but it's enough to access some of the other PPD spots in the chamber. And with this, everything else fell into place. An optimal Finale 4 speedrun now looked something like this. Start by preserving crouch fly from the previous level. Then, initiate PPD by rotating 0.12 degrees on Wheatley. Navigate to this ledge beneath the catwalk and obtain 10 degrees of rotation here while Wheatley monologues. Once the boss fight starts, jump over to the other side to break the gel pipe. After this, we hit our next PPD spot on the cover of the entry elevator, rotating around 11 degrees. During this, we make sure to place portals to redirect a bomb and stun Wheatley. After that, we'll move to the center of the decal to finish rotation, standing here for just over 20 seconds until we reach 67 degrees of total rotation. Now, we can jump up to grab the core, fly out of the corner of the chamber, drop the core next to the stalemate room wall, and if everything is just right, you can jump on the core and activate the secondary hitbox, clip through the wall, and in 15 seconds, shoot the moon and finish Portal 2. This is the Finale 4 skip, and on June 23, 2022, it became reality. For nearly a decade, this trick was a fairy tale, something the community only dreamed about. But now, you could finally skip the Wheatley boss fight. This strat is more commonly known as Occupyoinkle, which was the codename given to the strat when it was privately theorycrafted. If it rings a bell, it's because it's a Stanley Parable reference. Occupyoinkle saved nearly 45 seconds for a tool-assisted speedrun, and it became one of the greatest time saves found in the game. But unfortunately, only the tool-assisted run could utilize this skip. As for us humans, the trick had a ton of logistical barriers. Firstly, these PPD spots are precise, and incredibly hard to get into. It's not something that you can just scope out or get a feeling for. It would require some incredibly precise setups. Specifically, getting the initial rotation from Wheatley seemed impossibly rare. And the much more important thing about that whole second hitbox mumbo-jumbo, you can't actually see your hitboxes when you're doing a run, as the debug command is protected by cheats. This means that for the hitbox rotation that you spend nearly 2 minutes perfecting, you have no actual way of knowing if you're doing it right until you attempt the final clip at the end. So if you're off by even a little bit, you'll waste 2 minutes and fail. This means that this trick would be beyond stupid to attempt, especially right at the end of a nearly hour-long speedrun. So for any rational human being, Occupyoinkle is not humanly viable. But as we might know, speedrunners are not rational human beings, and with time, anything becomes possible. 2 years later, this route's human viability was brought back into question, specifically for leased portals. Theoretically, Occupyoinkle could be used to save 2 portal shots in Finale 4, so a slower variant of obtaining PPD rotation was being looked at for a humanly possible 4-portal Finale 4 solution. 2 runners, SuperAiderton and Black Semka, put a ton of time into the chamber, trying to find reasonable setups to initiate PPD. In June of 2024, Black Semka was able to find a relatively consistent way to use Wheatley's bomb shields to start PPD rotation. This strat wasn't completely reliable, but it was much more reasonable for a human to pull off, working around 1/3 of the time. After a while stuck in Wheatley's shield, rotation should be initiated, and he can stand on the PPD spot on the chamber elevator to continue the route. Everything here is precise, slow, and a little clunky, but Black Semka was able to get the necessary rotation and clip into the stalemate resolution room, beating Finale 4 in 4 portals, and pulling off Ocuboinkle in real time. Again, this was a least portals run, so the final time was almost twice as long as a normal Finale 4 speedrun, but it showed promise that maybe this could transfer over to speedruns. There were only a couple of missing parts for a fast human Ocuboinkle, and that was a reliable way to initiate PPD before Wheatley starts throwing bombs, and fast, consistent setups for the PPD spots. A couple months after the least portals run, these pieces would fall into place. Black Semka discovered a revolutionary technique to initiate PPD called wall rub. Normally, there's a super tiny buffer distance between the player and the wall when they collide, but by shimmying into a wall instead of walking straight into it, you can bypass the small distance and ever so slightly penetrate a wall and initiate a PPD rotation. Surprisingly, the small shimmy is the crucial detail that makes Ocuboinkle reasonable. Wall rub only gives PPD rotation on walls that are coded as physics objects, which this one in Finale 4 is, because later in the fight, the wall breaks. With this consistent way to initiate the player physics deformation glitch, SuperAiderton discovered some fast setups to use the PPD spots on the chamber elevator. With the efforts of these two, we finally had a full-fledged, human-viable Ocuboinkle. Well, sort of. The route was revealed to the community in September of 2024. They claimed it would save 15 seconds on a good run, and is 100% consistent if done correctly. And what followed was one of the most absurd, technical, and hard-to-do speedrun strats I've ever seen. It looked something like this. You would preserve crouch fly into the chamber, use it to barely ramp off of the starting elevator, and perform wall rub on the small ledge below the catwalk. After getting 9.8 degrees of rotation here, and breaking the gel pipe, you have to get into the PPD charge spots. And these are some of the most convoluted routes I've ever seen in Portal 2, and maybe even in speedrunning. For example, to get into this first PPD spot, you should go into the corner and set your second angle to 31.9. Hold forward and try to land on the charge spot at about x equals 75.2. A good strategy is to use a metronome set to 144 BPM, start holding forward on a beat, and release 8 beats later. But of course, even if you nail that, the trick doesn't get any easier. Next, you'll have to use a technique called view snap to quickly change your angle to get into the next charge spot. To do this, you set your sensitivity to precisely 225.455, turn your mouse DPI down, and move precisely 1 notch to the right. After that, bring out the metronome again and set it to 118 BPM. You're going to press forward on one beat, release it the next, press back on the beat, and then release it the next. After 20 seconds in this spot, you can grab the core and fly over to the area outside the stalemate resolution room. If everything has been done right, you should have enough rotation to clip into the stalemate room. But before that, you may have to fight with this core, who loves to roll around and prohibit you from standing on it in order to get a clean clip. After all of this, you can shoot the moon just about 12 seconds faster than a normal Portal 2 speedrun, ultimately skipping Finale 4 and saving time. I truthfully didn't even show you all of the technicalities behind this route, but it really is one of the most absurd and precise strats in the game. And as a reminder of all the other difficulties, this trick is right at the end of the run, you cannot see your hitbox rotation until attempting the clip, and additionally, quick saving does not store your second hitbox. So even if you realize you've made a mistake, you would have to restart the route all the way at the start of the chamber. So despite being quote-unquote humanly possible, I would imagine that a human would never pull off Ocuboinkle in a Portal 2 speedrun. At least, that's how these stories always start in speedrunning. Since Black Semka and SuperAiderton released this human viable route, only 2 runners have really looked at this strat. A runner named dazeeed has put a lot of time trying to perfect this skip, spending countless hours trying to understand all the intricacies of the setups. And yes, he did learn the trick with the metronome. He's pulled it off a couple of times in practice, but didn't really get the strat consistent enough for PB attempts. Despite this, he attempted runs with Occupyoinkle anyways. Even though dazeeed is nearly 5 minutes behind the world record and has a plethora of other, easier time saves to incorporate, he chose to learn Occupyoinkle, just to push the boundaries of what is possible and prove to the community that the strat was faster. Since then, he's beaten the best Finale 4 segment time by just 1 second. But since the strat loses more than 1 second preserving Crouchfly in the previous level, he technically hasn't fully saved time with the route. Today, he has given up doing the strat in runs, and got a new PB with bomb juggling. The other exception here is top runner Burger40, who learned Finale 4 skip not for its time save, but for its portals saved. In the 100 portals category extension, the goal is to beat the game using only 100 portal shots. In his world record run, Burger40 implemented Occupyoinkle in Finale 4, saving 2 extra portal shots to be used elsewhere. Because of this, he takes his time in most aspects of the trick. But even though he's able to pull it off surprisingly cleanly, getting everything first try, it's still 30 seconds slower than a normal speedrun of Finale 4. And that's it! Despite being one of Portal 2's biggest, most sought-after skips, the current setup is simply too complex for a human to reliably perform in a run. Nowadays, Occupyoinkle is rarely talked about in the Portal 2 speedrunning community. It's brought up every now and then as a reminder that the route is still technically possible, and that a perfect Portal 2 run would probably use it, but it's mostly thrown into conversations as a joke. If we see an improved, easier version, it might be possible to see Occupyoinkle in future attempts, especially as runners inch closer to sub-55-minute runs. They might become more desperate to incorporate harder strats. But until then, the puzzle that is Finale 4 skip still feels incomplete. Despite all of the progress made in the last decade through glitches like PPD and the discovery of Occupyoinkle, the skip still feels like a fraction of what the Portal 2 speedrunning community expects out of it. Let's hope it doesn't take another decade before we truly see humans skipping the boss fight at the end of their Portal 2 speedruns. And let's hope it doesn't require a metronome. Thanks for watching.